The Snapshots Music and Arts Foundation presents a conversation with Juilliard professor and noted author David Dubal on the history of the piano and state of classical music. Part 1.
Using this word, classical music, I know that Duke Ellington fought the word jazz, and he was trying to push it in another direction. How did that happen where this word, classical music, became limiting?
That occurred when sheet music was starting to sell Maple Leaf Rag and Nevins Narcissus. Later, classical music would start becoming part of the pop culture world in print, and you would have people, making it clear that, yes, Joplin was classic rag, but, now we have also all of the Slater manifestations, and they started calling it pop, and, they made most of these instrumental pieces, that were supposed to be piano rags into songs. Mm-hmm. Alexander's Ragtime Band, or there was one in 1911, I'm a Ragtime Life, or whatever. And they started realizing the songs, Tin Pan Alley. This is all very early in the century, Mm-hmm. Gershwin writes his first hit at, 17 or 18, Swanee. So words take over, you see. I don't mean like great poetry, such as Schubert said, or the great Lieder composers. Those are, highly serious works, and you don't necessarily have to know the language. Nice to know the song's meaning, but, basically that stimulated their creativity, poetry, in the 19th century. So these are still abstract pieces in a certain way, but as soon as it got into the rot of words and sentimentality, that word is a key word, by the way, sentimentality. We live in an age of total sentimentality in the concepts of romantic love, of the movies. It's a trash culture, based on what began in Tin Pan Alley, the idea of making money.
Just on that note, I was talking with someone about Apple computers and how everyone is sort of cooing about it, and the expression was uttered, "This is the age of homogeny."
Yeah. Well, look at the Apple computer. I mean, they must pay, a fortune for all the movies that you see Apple, because every scene now in anything has a computer in it, or you have to see the damn thing on a desk. And so there's the Apple in front of you, and oh, it's so friendly. It's human. They're calling it, it's so friendly, user friendly, and oh, how I love it. And it makes me an artist in photography, and on and on. This digital stuff destroyed in, no time the art of photography. Everyone is a great artist now.
Well, one thing a lot of young musicians are sort of asking themselves is, how can I have an identity in my sound? And that would seem to be a very important question in this period. And they don't understand how musicians and artists of the past were able to generate their own identity, their own sound.
Well, they worked endlessly to. You could study a nocturne for 5 years with the same teacher, getting some sort of beautiful sound. It wasn't, just that the pianos were better.
Yeah.
And they were. But we're living in the final decadence. It's, there will be only a cult of what we call classical music, of great music. And it will continue on a very, very slim level. I mean, it's almost non-existent now. It will be just these people who are called eccentric, strange, who love Chopin, and there won't be a 400th anniversary of Chopin's music, believe me, or a 300th. Horowitz said to me, I doubt there will be recitals 50 years after my death, that kind of thing. And well, he's not wrong. I mean, in 1960s, you would have New York Times actually print up all of the recital programs at Town Hall and everywhere else with, whatever the pianist is playing. And you could actually see, because there was enough cultivation in the public to actually actually read a newspaper and say, oh, I want to go to that because she's playing the Handel variations, and you would now, then it degenerated to just so-and-so is going to play this program. And then you, of course, you've had the decline in piano recitals throughout America. You used to have a friend of mine, Stanley Waldorf, a pianist, lives in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and he tells me of programs of the community concerts, of every great star of the world coming through Hattiesburg. Little towns, in Mississippi were flooded by, Ferkushny and Capel and on. He heard everyone.
Yes.
There hasn't been anyone, unless, it's some, star that, the orchestra there wants to play with, when you Perlman for 200,000 or Fleming for 100,000, that kind of thing. It's only stars that the people know. There was a domestic world where, you loved to ape your betters. Oh, my goodness, Joseph Hoffman is playing the G minor ballade. If only I could do that. And, you would get the music and you would, oh, well, it's so hard, I can't do it, but my God, I'm having a good time, playing. When you listen to him, those people knew, oh, my God, they knew this was a different kind of performance, a different sound from theirs. You see, there was a connoisseurship, which is, left. No one knows, the difference between anything. You could tell them anything, as a matter of fact. You could tell grown-up people lies, and they will believe it. Historically, you'll say, well, this happened, in 1740. Not a chance that it happened, but they'll believe you because they are totally uneducated population, and the young illiterate. There are wonderful young people that are brilliant and so forth, but they're living in a tragic time because their brilliance is put to use only through competition, through getting into Harvard or the best schools. So there's no such thing as really liberal arts concept. Catherine Ann Porter used to say, when I grew up in 1910 or 11, and that's about the end of it, when Sousa said, the record will kill amateurism in music. And of course it did. But she said, we went to school, and like it or not, classical culture was our was something to be honored, something to be cherished. The great books, the great literature, and so forth. But we're 100 years from that, and we turned into a consumer mechanical world. So there's almost no way to get someone to read. How could anyone really read and concentrate on the screen? You must touch the paper. You must look closely at it. You must write something in there, maybe, if you're interested. You must curl the page. If you want to go back to it, you have to read it 2-3 times. What can this do except make you blind? Kindle and things like this. All of these terrible, terrible machines that take away all possible concentration. And there is none. So, of course, at Juilliard, it's a great experience to teach, the young people who work for nothing, hour after hour after hour with no, feeling that they're going to ever have careers in this time, but they still love it, and, they try to get away with it as long as possible. Tell them the only thing you're going to be able to do is to survive is to rob a bank.
Just to the point you made, interestingly, the CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, said recently that the benefits of technology with young people are that it increases hand-eye coordination. Young people are able to multitask on their computers, etc. But then he ended with a caveat, which is, he said, I'm concerned, though, about long-term attention spans as reading books in long form decreases, but we don't know what the effects of that will be.
The effects are here every minute. There's no concentration. Editing on television is by the quarter second. Multitasking is impossible for the brain if it's going. How do you? Would Rembrandt be on his text? Doing the text while he's painting his portrait?
Good observation.
Beethoven, working on, when you play the piano, what are you thinking of? Getting back to the computer and seeing, pornography, which has become the only reason men buy the goddamn thing. So, the point is, it's already taken its toll way over. We're quite near the edge. I mean, there's nothing to do about it, Johnson. It's here. It will never change. It'll only get worse. No way out.
If it's this bad now, what could it look like in 10, 20, 30 years?
Well, there just will be, fewer and fewer concerts, no patronage almost for the arts, certainly not by the government. The rich have not the slightest idea of what art is. They grew up as patrons, or in the very rich gave halls, and Severance Hall in Cleveland, Heinz Hall in Carnegie Hall. That's one of the things they did, to assuage sometimes their business guilt. And, it helped the community. Now orchestras are failing. How many thousands of students graduate a year in piano alone? You don't have any more than 10 people making any real big bucks playing the piano worldwide. It will just dwindle and dwindle and dwindle, and there will be change. The people that love it will, get themselves together and in a house, and you'll have 3, 4 people and 5 people. The young are there to play for the old. That's what's happened. And soon the old will, their children never, replenished it. They were, into the electronic revolution. They grew up with Elvis and, drugs and rock and roll and so forth. We're enveloped by pop culture, and pop culture is television, sports, movies. There's not what can you call these movies? I mean, they're ridiculous. Explosions, let's call them, and they're made to have, one good weekend. There's no distribution of, fine movies from Europe. There's still extremely excellent movies in, Denmark, Finland, Holland, France, of course. A few in Italy, but we don't get them. You have 1 or 2 theaters even in New York, so you're not going to be able to see anything of importance, in the great hinterlands. And this is from coast to coast is 3 million miles. We have lost the idea that a person is anything but just a commodity. That's what we are. We cannot avoid that when you say, my identity, tonal identity? What are you talking about? First of all, recordings have homogenized sound to such a degree that, it's very hard to say this is really so-and-so playing, unless, it's done by a sensitive producer or mixer or what. All of that is very important. A recording is not a live performance, that's for sure. And a recording is a wonderful, I've made my living from it, so to speak, but it is not the live, breathing thing. The more you take it, just like you take away the dance from the mazurka or the waltz, the more rigid you play it, It's just the coldness of the human world at this moment. Not to mention its, horror politically and all of its religious madnesses. So, we're in a tough time. It's a transition period. There will be no sculpture. Poetry is gone. Architecture is, a joke. You really want to look at these buildings that they're building? I mean, my heart quakes when I look at them. So you see, beauty or elegance, or, if Chopin was playing today, the critic would say, well, he's so soft we can't hear him. How can he fill Carnegie Hall? He played in, small places. He complained when he played in a 1,000-seat hall in Edinburgh. There are many exciting things that are happening right now, in New York. Little venues are popping up here and there. People are figuring out how to, make different kind of recitals from the old-fashioned ones. There's no straightforward line to making anything happen anymore. Managers are few and far between that, have any real interest. You have to bring them concerts before they're going to. So who killed classical music? The society did. It's not managements or unions. They've all played a part in an inevitable destruction. The LP was not distributed when it should have been to schools, and everything was concentrated on, from the mid-50s when it was a new medium to rock and roll, Elvis, and so forth. And when Elvis died, there wasn't even one RCA thing of his in print, so they, made a huge industry after his death for crossover albums with serious artists. How can you have Yo-Yo Ma play, this restricted cello literature? You got to have him, do things with jazz or whatever else he does, Christmas carols. I am an enemy of popular culture, Johnson, meaning that doesn't mean that I don't know what's good in it. I'm an enemy of it for moral reasons, and we have to have many, many more. I don't like the classical musician saying, "Oh, I love that rock group," or something like that in public, because, isn't that divine, that, so-and-so singer or whatever. You see, they're going over to the enemy without understanding that, because they want to be cool. It's been going on now 80 years, that word. Oh, cool. Cool, man, cool. Got to be cool. It's a word that won't die. Words and music have nothing in common. Opera is theater with, music accompaniment, sometimes very great, Tello or Boris or Tristan. Wagner is not a composer like Beethoven. You cannot have words and music. And what we crave now, the people that are intellectually still alive, what we crave is no words. I tell my people, why are you here? You're here to hear the piano because there's no words. For an hour or two a week, you get away from the lies and the ambiguity of words into what we really need to bring the nonverbal aspects of our brain into some sort of serenity from the other side, which is a mechanical, verbal thing. Now, these are very, very important, concepts, which, no one talks about. They're just talking about these, superficial things. Will it still be here? Will it not be here? Yes, it will be here. There will be some young pianist that sees some Chopin preludes and is that beautiful. But believe me, the concept of poetic beauty can be wiped out of you, just like handwriting has been wiped out of us. Right. Genetically speaking, there is a lower level of genius today, and a lower level of talent on all things. And if it's not mechanical talent, which is owned again by, just very few people. There's only one person that has spoken to God, and that's Beethoven. And Beethoven is, thus far, it's unfortunate, but he's our major consciousness of the human race. And that's why he's our, he's our big composer. Beethoven was your transcendental figure. There was never one greater than him in harmonic music. And so we're waiting. There's a wonderful book by Sullivan called Beethoven and the Spiritual Development. He calls his music at the end of his life, states of consciousness. No longer, I'm going to move to this key or that key. And that's what we're waiting for, and it's been interrupted by, the materialism of the Industrial Revolution and its shoddiness. We're waiting for people to have that kind of consciousness of Bach, of Rembrandt, of Dante, of Plato, of Aristotle. I mean, we still haven't surpassed them as philosophers, have we? So it's just words, and people will read, Ayn Rand, some silly stuff like that, or then Plato. I mean, they don't know what they're reading even, because there's been no, in 1960, I heard there were 16 courses at Ohio State University on Plato alone, or one of those universities. Now, you can't even get one. Bloom, the great scholar, when he talks about Shakespeare, you see a tear in his eyes, on TV if he's interviewed, He said he created the human race. Absolutely. He created what we are, and now, we can't even understand that language. Can't even understand William Byrd's music, the Shakespeare of that time, in music. We don't know anything except romantic music as it stands. So as it became more and more rotten that way in the 19th century, and we all love it, we have a repertoire that, is as big as the Tchaikovsky Concerto and the Rachmaninoff. That's it. And then, of course, 5 times a year, the Beethoven Third, at the Philharmonic or whatever. But the point is that, the teachers, the young people are not, interested in the music of the 20th century. because they were not taught anything. They were just taught to think of themselves as, here are 5 pieces that will show you off. You have 30 million people playing the piano in China, so to speak, what do they want? They want a fame and glory.
To be like Lang Lang, right?
Well, that's what they all say. I mean, when I was in Shanghai, I said, what do you want to be? We want to be like Lang Lang.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Of course. Not like, Ignaz Friedman suffering over, getting the sound he wants in the mazurkas for, 5 years or something like that until he perfects something, or a painter or a writer or a poet. The solitary arts are over with, and if you notice the word solitary, you see, we've changed from a solitary artistic climate to an orgiastic one. And the problem is once again more philosophical. I tell the students, I'm sorry to tell you, you're not in a profession, you're not in a business, you're not, there is no such thing as the business of art.
Right.
This is nonsense. You are not doing this for money. Whoever told you that art's supposed to pay at all?
Mm-hmm.
And, that's a whole other topic. Of course, people have to make a living. But, it's a long day, and, if you don't like to teach, don't teach, because, that's harmful.
Mm-hmm.
If you think that's the way to make money. So, as I said, rob a bank in Genoa, or, marry a congresswoman if there are any. There are a few, or perhaps, become Sarah Palin's, friend. Find a good sponsor like her. Just like there's no one way of making a career in any way. It's, there's chance, there's luck, but in the sense of a urban population now saying, I think that, my children and grandchildren, it's a form of ecology, no one is trying to save this. It's always been hard for the artist.
Yes.
This is not something new. Many have, when Schubert was in Vienna, that was the thing to be at that moment, in history, and it became a bohemian place for poets and painters and musicians. Well, who survived of the thousands of people who went there to starve, La Boheme-wise? Only Schubert. So it's never going to be easy, but if that's your calling, there has to be some little glimmer of hope. When I feel that my students are in despair, and more of them are, well, what are we going to do? There's thousands that want to get into Juilliard, and only a few can. So many pianists, just like there are, or violinists, there's so many of everything in the young today. And there's no market. So, you're going to have to, through what, education? That's true. You're not going to start a new generation tomorrow and say, okay, now we're going to, in 30 years, you're going to all be classical music consumers. It can't be a consumption concept. And here is my message to all of the pop culture. Well, I understand how you got that way. Yeah. It's all been a fabulous propaganda. And it's a shame that the propaganda didn't work for art, because your lives would be changed. You could not be listening or reading the junk or watching the television that you do if you had a standard of what was great. It's just not possible, maybe 1 hour every year, but it's just not possible to hear the junk after you have, been sensitized to greatness. There's the message.
Continue to Part 2.